BP says it has another way to contain the gushing oil now that Topcale has failed. That failure is causing BP shares to get hammered in London this morning. For more on how this disaster is hurting BP, we are joined right now by Jason Gammel of Macquarie Securities. Jason has been one of the most accurate forecasters of BP's stock over the past year. Jason, we're so glad you made it in. What does this failure of Topcale really mean? I mean, we know BP has to continue. They have to try to find another solution. We know there's this kind of pipe effort that is likely to start in 4 days. But what does this mean to the company? Can it survive?
Well, we don't think this is existential at this point. There's clearly an unquantifiable liability that the company's
I want to pick out that word right away because Ken Salazar did use that word. He said BP is in an existential crisis, which almost means is he questioning the company's existence?
Well, it's one of these things where the liability could be several billion dollars, tens of billions of dollars even. I do think that BP has the balance sheet capacity to actually be able to handle a hit like that. It's clearly not something you want from a stock that you own, but I don't see this as existential at this point in time.
Then how do you feel, is it justified, I should say, that people are beginning to talk in the marketplace of is BP going to be taken over by an Exxon, by a Shell, by another equally large partner?
I think whenever a stock falls as rapidly as BP has, then the idea that there's a lot of value that are in the underlying assets does make it potentially a takeover candidate. I think it's too early to say, though, that they are a takeover candidate simply because no one wants an unquantifiable liability, including Exxon and including Shell. And until we get a better handle on what this is actually going to cost, I don't see BP as a particularly strong takeover candidate.
What's your advice then to people who are already in BP? Do they sell? Do they just hold on and hope things get better?
We maintain an official neutral stance on the stock. We do think that the stock has probably more than priced in the worst case scenario, so if I owned it now, I probably wouldn't be selling it. By the same point, I don't really think you need to rush out and buy BP stock right now. I really don't think the stock's going to move up appreciably until we get an idea on when the flow is going to stop in the Gulf.
So if you're not in it, just be happy, stay out on the sidelines. If you do hold it, hang on for the ride. I want to bring in our colleague Adam Johnson. He is actually at the U.S. headquarters of BP in Houston, Texas. Adam, you have a question for Jason?
Yeah, I sure do, Jason. Yeah, we're down here in Houston where it's hot, and of course BP feeling the heat. If this thing doesn't get plugged until, say, the relief well strikes, and of course they hope that it strikes in August, just how much pain can BP take, and how much money can they spend before something's got to give?
Well, in terms of how much pain they can take, I mean, I think that they have the capacity on the balance sheet to take on at least $15 billion of debt, and I think that there's actually even more capacity than that. And that should really probably cover any of the costs that could be incurred over this time frame. So I do think that anything that they're trying now until the intervention well gets drilled is going to be low probability. I do think the intervention well is the one thing that, from an industry standpoint, we know should work. So, you know, I think we are talking about them taking the pain of this happening for probably another 6, 8, 10 weeks until those intervention wells are actually successful.
Now, Jason, not to be alarmist, but we're just trying to hammer out all the possible scenarios. Obviously, hurricane season starts June 1st. That's this week. If, God forbid, there were a hurricane to come in and start to push some of that oil inshore, how do you try to quantify that? And how do you sort of make a scenario analysis in that case?
Well, certainly, you know, I think that just the flow of oil itself is something that you're putting all the shoreline into danger at that point, and certainly a hurricane is going to affect on how the oil actually flows. You know, I think you're really talking about having to spend in the billions of dollars to go out and actually protect the shoreline. You're going to have to bring in incremental booms. You're going to have to use the skimming process, use the burn-off procedures that they've been using. All these things you're just going to have to continue moving forward on an aggressive basis to try to contain this as much as possible.
Jason, in one word, Tony Hayward, does he keep his job longer than a year?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. We have to have you back. Jason Gammel joining us there from Macquarie.